Welcome back to Two Converts. I'm Rusty, and that stalwart defender of the faith and our country over there is.
Jason.
That's right. We are two converts to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Both Jason and I joined the church when we were in high school, and we never looked back. We love learning the gospel, living the gospel, and sharing the gospel, which is why we do this channel. And if you are interested in undermining skeptical content about the church, you won't find that here. That's not how we roll. Our goal is twofold. We want to help people investigating the church find answers to their questions from the perspective of two people who join the church from the outside and maybe have those questions that they grappled with themselves. And also we want to help those of you that are already converts, that are members of the church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to further ignite your testimonies or reignite them and deepen your conversion to the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. Here's how you can help us. Subscribe, click that notification bell so you're updated when we post. Put your comments. Those that your insights may just be that little nugget, that little tidbit that somebody needs to kind of complete their picture and feel comfortable moving forward as far as their conversion process. And for those of you that are investigating, please keep coming back. Throw your questions down in the comments. We'd be happy to answer those either in the comments or in an upcoming video. And Jason, we just hit today 420 subscribers. Our goal is to hit 500 by the end of summer. Thank you for all the new subscribers and old ones that hang around. We love seeing you around in the comments. This helps us with the algorithm. The more subscribers we have, the more comments we have, the more likes and shares on the videos. That helps the channel get in front of more people. And before we get into it today, as you know, we are in the war chapters, the back half in Alma chapter 53 through 63. And you see behind me an ancient and modern depiction of what Moroni might have looked like, hoisting his title of liberty. And it's really important. Like, let's view these chapters through the lens of what would it look like today? And it's really uncanny, these similarities between what Moroni saw in his day and what we're seeing today. So we are not pulling punches, guys. We are not officially a channel for the church. The church has to understandably be very careful about what they say. It is a worldwide church, and it's completely understandable that they do what they do as far as presenting topics and trying to be non-political. We, however, are not bound by such constraints, and we will tell it how we see it today. Is that fair, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, we're taught in the scriptures to liken them unto ourselves, and there are real combat lessons from the war chapters of the Book of Mormon that, if you've seen those conditions, then you know that the writers of the Book of Mormon are speaking about the real battlefield,
Absolutely.
physical
Okay.
battlefield.
We've got a lot to cover, and they're very important topics because it's very relevant to what we're dealing with. Hopefully, we can fit it all in. We might have to record a little bit long, but we're going to dive right into it and try to take it at a good pace, but dive deep because we see in the comments what you guys appreciate, what you like. So let's jump right in. Alma chapter 53, verse 11. Jason, for sake of time, I might just be reading a lot of these and asking questions just to try to keep the pace going. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Verse 11. And because of their oath, they had been kept from taking up arms against their brethren. This was the anti-Nephi-Lehites that had joined the church. For they had taken an oath that they never would shed blood more, and according to their oath, they would have perished. Yea, they would have suffered themselves to have fallen into the hands of their brethren, which they had done before, had it not been for the pity and the exceeding love which Ammon and his brethren had for them. Jason, is it more righteous? I think a lot of people read this, whether members of the church or not, and they think, oh, this is our golden standard for how to face combat. Is it more righteous to run from the fight?
No, you have to look at the full context. Even here, we're just looking at one verse. But uh, this we got to look at all these chapters together and look at the composite before we make a decision on who's more righteous, less righteous. That's not really the point. These Lamanites were actually murderers. They weren't just war fighters, warriors. They were murderers. They had slain innocent blood, and so they're bearing their swords because they don't want to stir up those sins again, right? Totally different than people who, like Captain Moroni, who are not murderers, but nevertheless have to kill their enemies. It's a very different, two different categories of people altogether. In any case, these anti-Nephi Lehis, they rely upon the Nephite army to protect them. So they're not true pacifists. True pacifists are anti-war everywhere. They don't support, they protest their troops. And these ones were, they weren't taking up the swords themselves, but they were providing provisions,
Mhm.
food, support, resources, taxes. They just weren't doing the actual killing, but they were part of the war. So there's I would actually dare say there is no pacifism in the Book of Mormon whatsoever.
Yeah. And to be clear, let's get this out of the way up front. To be clear, we are also anti-war, but we are not naive to the realities of the human condition and fallen nature of man. And the Lord commands us to defend ourselves. Last week we covered in Alma chapter 43, verse 47, that we're commanded to defend our families even unto bloodshed. So even though we would prefer peace and we would prefer not having to go to war, we're also not blind to the realities that there is wicked in the world and evil people want to destroy you for no other reason than that
Yeah.
you are trying to follow the Lord. That is something that I think a lot of people struggle with is they have a real hard time embracing that concept. And because they've been so sheltered, they can live in this kind of naive land while all around them, and we're going to get down to them. They're being protected and shielded at a distance, and so they can live in this fantasy land. Just like we're going to look at, Pahoran and maybe some of the other governors
Yeah.
later about that situation. Anyway, moving on, verse 17 through 18. Now it's interesting. The anti-Nephi Lehites covenanted to not shed blood, but what did their children do? Who, from all appearances, would be just as righteous, if not more, in many instances than their parents. What did they covenant to do? 17 through 18. And these stripling warriors, and they entered into a covenant to fight. They covenanted to fight for the liberty of the Nephites, yea, to protect the land under the laying down of their lives. Yea, even they covenanted that they never would give up their liberty, but they would fight in all cases to protect the Nephites and themselves from bondage. Quite the opposite story here, isn't it? Verse 18. Now behold, there were 2,000 of those young men who entered into this covenant and took their weapons of war to defend their country. Jason, what did the Stripling Warriors covenant to do?
They covenanted to defend their people, defend their liberty, their homes, their property, their religion, their rights. And it was a solemn covenant. It was an oath. It's not something that you back out of. That it's something that you move forward to in a sacred way.
And I'll add that it was a righteous covenant.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Chapter 54, verse 6 through 7, and then verse 10. Behold, I would tell you somewhat concerning the justice of God and the sword of his almighty wrath, which doth hang over you, except you repent and withdraw your armies unto your own lands, or the land of your possessions, which is the land of Nephi. Now, by way of context, this is Moroni talking to Zarahemnah, a Lamanite general, chieftain, captain that was leading his troops against the Nephite nation. This is Moroni talking to him. Verse 7. Yea, I would tell you these things if you were capable of hearkening unto them. Yea, I would tell you concerning that awful hell that awaits to receive such murderers as thou and thy brother have been, except ye repent. The central message of the Book of Mormon, according to Hugh Nibley and my take two, except ye repent and withdraw your murderous purposes and return with your armies to your own lands. And then in verse 10, but as the Lord liveth, our army shall come upon you, except ye withdraw, and ye shall soon be visited with death. For we will retain our cities and our lands, yea, and we will maintain our religion and the cause of our God. So this is a sensitive one, but again, we said we're not going to try to play the PC game today. Should members of the church allow themselves to be invaded?
Not at all. I mean, all these chapters, it's constant preparation by Captain Moroni and his armies to protect the people, to protect their land, their property. their religious freedom, their families. I mean, that's, there's different oaths out there in the U.S. military, duty to God, duty to country. I mean, when you look at the title liberty, that's all it is. If you sum it up, it's duty to God, number one, duty to country, number two, and then number three, duty to family. I don't know if the title liberty is supposed to be in priority, but that's what it is. So, um, the duty to country piece, I think we're very afraid of talking about, but it's definitely in these scriptures, and it's crystal clear. And so, you know, we have to build up this portion of our personal characters and our collective character, or I don't think we're fully living the Book of Mormon.
Yeah. I mean, think about this, please, viewers. Many people think, oh, well, this stuff isn't going to be happening in toward, in our day. What happened to the saints when the church was first restored? They were driven out of the Northwest. They were driven out of Ohio. Or Northeast. They were driven out of Missouri. They were driven out of Illinois at gunpoint because they were overrun by people for no other reason that they did not agree with them religiously. The saints had to flee to unincorporated America, right? Which was Utah, which was not American territory at the time, to get away from physical persecution. And it's shocking to me that we invite so much of this around us. I mean, we're basically, there was comments in the Journal of Discourses about, the saints had to flee to the mountains to get away from Babylon, but they were very anxious to build the railroads and bring Babylon to them when they were already set up in Salt Lake. And we've seen what's happened to Salt Lake, how it's deteriorated and where the morals are. And, again, like we said, we're not pulling punches. So this idea that some people, it's just a delusion that the persecutions will not flare again and that, oh, our neighbors, it's all cool. They're Christians. They like us too. That's not what history has told us, even in recent history. Okay. So, you have to look at reality and not live in la la land. Is that fair, Jason?
Yeah, I think I look at these issues more in terms of like a national collective,
Oh, yeah.
and I look at the threats to the United States of America collectively. I think many Americans actually do look at Latter-day Saints as their neighbors, as their friends, as their partners. I feel like I have great relationships with many non-Latter-day Saints, and that what binds us is just a commitment to the cause of America. Um, and there's exceptions, of course, but I think overall, what my view of this is that I think Latter-day Saints should take more responsibility for America, more responsibility for their country. It's like title of liberty: love God, love your family. Well, what about love your country and do to your country?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of weak there, and I feel America will never be as strong as it needs to be until Latter-day Saints take more responsibility for the destiny of their own country. At least those Latter-day Saints that are American.
Completely agree with you, Jason. I'm glad that you added that perspective. So I was looking more at obviously the Pioneer Corridor, right? If you look where the highest concentration of
Yeah,
the saints are and what happened there. But again, those persecutions didn't happen in Utah. They happened in Ohio and all that. And I served my mission in Missouri and you served in New Jersey. And there are still many people who would love to exterminate the Mormons, even though we are being civil right now. My only warning here is that when civility crumbles, um, which is what happens, right? We can look around the world and see many instances of that. You can't be surprised if you're in the minority religiously and you're persecuted for that. Look at what's happening in the UK right now. There was literally this guy that was jailed for what I think the sentence was 20 months for posting on Facebook his displeasure with the immigrants, the refugees that are there in UK. They're getting overrun, and he was jailed for expressing his concerns about it. So, how far on the heels is America for that, right? And yes, we're going to talk more about these freedoms we need to defend
yeah,
moving forward. Okay.
yeah.
Let's move into chapter 55, verse 19. Do you want to read that one, Jason?
Sure. But behold, this was not the desire of Moroni. He did not delight in murder or bloodshed, but he delighted in the saving of his people from destruction. And for this cause, he might not bring upon him injustice. He would not fall upon the Lamanites and destroy them in their drunkenness.
So this was one of the stratagems that the Nephites implemented in retaking the land, and they got the guards drunk, and they were able to take over the city. But what should temper bloodshed and war? So Moroni said, "Hey, ye shall defend your family even unto bloodshed." But he had the opportunity here, but he didn't want to. So Jason, what should temper that bloodshed?
Well, it's your cause, you know. Are you doing this to dominate
Mm,
your enemy, or are you doing this to save your people from destruction? It's all about the intent. Um, and you know what's the aim of war? That's what these war chapters are all trying to determine as they tell the narrative. So Moroni made this decision not to just destroy the Lamanites when they're drunk. So um, you know, he had some war ethics, but ultimately he's making decisions to simply preserve his own people is the end state.
yeah. And what I took out of this is it depends on the situation, right? Many soldiers who are further down the rank and aren't setting, um, it's not their commander's intent, right? They're just following orders. We have in recent history members of the church who belong to maybe opposing armies, right? There's stories about German soldiers who are members of the church during like the World Wars. That's kind of an uncomfortable situation, right? And the
Yeah.
brethren talked about that. But these soldiers who were following orders who didn't dictate, I could absolutely see taking mercy on them because we know that when Amalekite went and gathered up his armies, they didn't want to go to war against the Nephites. He compelled them to, right? So he was showing mercy there. But interesting, draw that contradistinction with what Teancum did to Amalickiah and then to Amoron. That was a clear, outright, cut and dry assassination. Was that justified? Well, Amalickiah was the cause of this war and sufferings on both sides, and it would continue if he was not taken out. So, in my mind, he was completely justified in that action. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, what's their goal, right? And what's the
Mhm.
enemy's goal? The enemy is trying to destroy them, exterminate them, or subdue them, put them under bondage, and they're doing what they need to do to preserve their people.
Yeah.
We're not a martyr like people, or I mean, at least the Book of Mormon doesn't advocate for that. If you've got righteous people, you've built you're building Zion, you need to preserve it. You need to defend it. You need to create a military force. You need to create a functional state. And that's why I think what Captain Moroni, the lesson of Captain Moroni is all. Why are there so many chapters about this?
Jason,
Um,
I'm glad you
you
brought that
know,
up. Were you wrapping up your thought there?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's if it's written for our day, you got to take a step back and what is the guidance to a nation?
Exactly. And that's one reason again that I feel that I think it's an evidence of the Book of Mormon that it is true and it was written for our day because many Christians throughout history have walked away from their study of the New Testament, developing kind of a twisted pacifist type thing, believing that's what Christ taught, not looking at it in the context, but thinking those were general terms that people should always follow. And that's one reason I do love the Book of Mormon because it fits those two together. Is yes, it is completely appropriate when you're not in danger, when your family's not in danger, to take offenses and not retaliate. But if you have an enemy who is heck bent on your destruction, that's a different context, and we're given God's word on how to handle those situations, right? And this
Yeah,
is what we'd be facing in the last day. Again, I think that's a powerful evidence of the Book of Mormon, especially considering Joseph Smith did not know about this stuff, right? When you look at the complexity of the battle strategy and the reality of war, this is something you never experienced and wouldn't know. And how insightful these things are, again, evidence of the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon. Agreed?
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
All right. Chapter 56, verse 10. So now we're introduced to what these stripling warriors do in fighting. Chapter 10 or verse 10 in chapter 56. And I did join my 2,000 sons, for they are worthy to be called sons, to the army of Antipas, in which strength Antipas did rejoice exceedingly. For behold, his army had been reduced by the Lamanites because their forces had slain a vast number of our men, for which cause we have to mourn. Nevertheless, we may console ourselves in this point that they have died in the cause of their country and of their God, yea, and they are happy. Again, this is clear statements to answer this question. Are warriors condemned to punishment and misery when they die?
Oh, not at all. I mean, if you're doing what's righteous, you're giving yourself for your country, for your family, for your God. Um, you should have peace, that you're doing the right thing and you're doing the best you can.
It is called the ultimate sacrifice, right? You are laying out everything, your hopes, your dreams, your loves, your comforts, everything for the freedoms of your fellow countrymen, right? And your posterity and your wife and your children. That's the ultimate sacrifice. And those who try to say that they're wicked when their cause was just are completely missing the mark. 45 through 47. And now I say unto you, my beloved brother Moroni, this was Helaman talking to Moroni in letter, that never had I seen so great courage, nay, not amongst all the Nephites. And he's recounting the story of his stripling warriors. For as I had ever called them my sons, for they were all of them very young, even so they said unto me, Father, behold, our God is with us, and he will not suffer that we should fall. Then let us go forth. We would not slay our brethren if they would let us alone. Therefore let us go, lest they should overpower the army of Antipas. Now they never had fought, yet they did not fear death. And they did think more upon the liberty of their fathers than they did upon their lives. Yea, they had been taught by their mothers that if they did not doubt, God would deliver them. Jason, what inspired the stripling warriors?
They're thinking about their families, they're thinking about their responsibility uh, to preserve their families, and also their liberty in the sense the Book of Mormon's definition of liberty is not just do whatever you want. It's
Mm,
it's basically that you're not in bondage,
mm-hmm.
whether you're not in slavery, that
Good
that you're
distinction.
yeah. So it's a little bit different definition of liberty than we think of when we're um, thinking about all the range as Americans. So, because they're facing a real threat that if they don't win this fight, then they're going to basically be slaves to the Lamanites. So, and they had righteous mothers who were willing to put their sons out there. I mean, that is a real warrior culture. I mean, you go and look at the Spartans, I mean, they were radical and basically, uh, if
From
if you
cradle
came
to
back,
grave, that was their lifestyle, man.
yeah, if you came back from war, alive, like the mothers would be sad. I think that's going beyond the mark. But here, the mothers are instilling them with faith. If they did not doubt, God would deliver them. So their mothers have faith that if their sons go forth and fight nobly, and these are mothers who were, you know, for they didn't fight in war, but now they're training their sons to be warriors, right? Okay, like I said, there's no pacifism in the Book of Mormon. If it's just it was a temporary decision. Now all of a sudden, that same generation of fathers and mothers is gearing up their sons to be the hardest core warriors in the whole Book of Mormon.
Yeah, and on that note, that's actually something that really jumped out to me is this statement, they did think more upon the liberty of their fathers.
Yeah.
And why did the liberty of their fathers matter? And my thought is, could it be that if the anti-Nephi Lehis were captured by the Lamanites, they would be forced to arms again, and this would cause them to break their covenants? They were a people who were zealous and doing everything they could to keep their covenants, and their ability to do so might be lost if they lost this war. So it could be that these sons
Hmm. I
loved
see.
their parents so much and realized, I don't want my parents to have to break that covenant and potentially be lost. Therefore, I'm going to fight to preserve that liberty so they can keep those covenants,
Yeah.
right? Because they might be compelled. And that's interesting. That was just a thought that I had on that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to verse 56. Can you read that, Jason? And this,
Yeah.
just
Well, go ahead.
consider this question. Is being terrifying an act of mercy?
Yeah, I love this part of it.
Okay.
Uh, behold, to my great joy, there had not one soul of them fallen to the earth. Yea, and they had fought as if with the strength of God. Yea, never were men known to have fought with such miraculous strength and with such mighty power did they fall upon the Lamanites that they did frighten them. And for this cause did the Lamanites deliver themselves up as prisoners of war.
Is
This,
being terrifying an act of mercy?
yeah, well, yes, it's an act of mercy, but it's also the Book of Mormon is instruction to the proper demeanor of a warrior. You know, if you're fighting an enemy that's vicious for your blood, you need to fight in such a way that you frighten them so that they surrender, they deliver themselves up, they give up their arms, and they willingly become prisoners of war. You're fighting. The Book of Mormon is just instructing that if you're going to fight, you fight so hard to the point of frightening your enemy, and that's what is needed. And I think modern day warriors that are um, that have to face these great evils in the world.
Yeah.
And that's just a principle, but um, that we need to take it's written for our day. We can't have weak, flimsy war fighters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is it. If you come in with the ferocity that these people who are, wicked and they're just looking for, basically booty, right? That's what they want. They're fighting for, because they were made promises of being able to rule over the Nephites and, being able to put them in bondage and get, labor and gold and riches. That was their motivator, right? And also just a hatred against them. But the Nephites turned it on and scared the doodle out of these guys to where they went, whoa. And then what did the Nephites do? Did they have the mentality of take no prisoner? No. They immediately showed mercy, and many in these chapters we learn were preached to and had a chance to repent and turn, right? That again shows the righteous cause of the Nephites there, that they weren't
Yeah,
just killing them and then trying to put them in bondage. No, they were trying to save these people still. And I will claim that it was an act of mercy and empathy to come at them with such ferocity. Anyway, chapter
yep.
57, verse 21. I think this is often glossed over, and I think it's incredibly powerful. The question: why were the Stripling Warriors so effective? Verse 21, let's read this one closely. Yea, and they did obey and observe to perform every word of command with exactness. Yea, and even according to their faith, it was done unto them. And I did remember the words which they said unto me, that their mothers had taught them. Why were the Stripling Warriors so effective, Jason?
They were exactly obedient. They, they were loyal. They were loyal to their God. They were loyal to their country and to their cause. So they did what they were commanded to do. And that also brought a kind of a unity of arms that enabled them, I think, to accomplish their mission. The Book of Mormon is an instruction manual for the latter days. And if you're going to go to war, we've become removed from this because, in the days of like President Hinckley, Elder Maxwell, President Monson, we had all these greatest generation leaders that they almost all had fought in World War II, and they had seen what that was about. And now I think, we're getting removed from that generation, and it's very easy to get complacent. One thing that helped American Latter-day Saints stay strong to their country was they were reared on the butter of the greatest generation. But now we're kind of there's some complacency when I think that the covenant of the Book of Mormon it's not just a covenant with God and a covenant with your family, it's also a covenant with your country. And how much do we talk about that?
Well said. We're going to move into that in more detail. So, why were the Stripling Warriors so effective? Well, in verse 19, it says that the Striplings did administer death to all those that oppose them. Obedience is faithfulness. And
Yeah,
they were prospered and preserved in warfare as they kept the commandments. And
yeah,
I think many parents today feel that being permissive with their children is more loving and will help them be healthier people, right? These are the buzz terms that we're hearing today. I think we've been running this experiment for a while now, and that's not the results that I'm seeing, right? Just like you said, this greater generation and this, this spine that the previous generations had and this determination to defend the country. And people are so lost in this, self-help and doing what's right for me and all this kind of stuff that a lot of this greater good concern doesn't seem to be inherent with these kids, kind of as what you were just saying, what's being removed from these previous generations. Okay, chapter 58, the Nephites retake Manti without losing anyone. They fear there's a faction in the government because they did not receive more assistance. That becomes very relevant in these coming chapters. Chapter 59, Moroni is pumped that Helaman had been successful in regaining these lands, and he sent to Pahoran requesting more assistance to be sent to Helaman. But the ground was lost, and Moroni was furious about it. In chapter 59, verse 13, and it came to pass that Moroni was angry with the government because of their indifference concerning the freedom of their country. And Jason, I think this goes right to the heart about what you were talking about a little while ago. Are we indifferent? Are we becoming indifferent about our freedoms?
yeah. This is the concern. If we really believe the Book of Mormon's written for our day, we gotta dig into this because these are all divinely inspired pieces to build individual's character, a family's character, a national character, and you got to look at Moroni's passion. He's not a bloodthirsty man, but he's passionate about his people, and he's willing to call it as it is. And if he sees complacency and indifference, you're going to see him really challenge that in a very direct and blunt way. And uh, that's you know, what's interesting is that it actually builds everyone's confidence in Moroni. When you become a leader of this kind of spine, people and responsibility, people will want to follow you even more, which is actually what actually happens.
Absolutely. Are we indifferent about our freedoms? I think we need to arm up spiritually and physically, brothers and sisters. There are evil forces at play in our beloved homelands, and it is probably getting close to the time that we will have to defend them on our own soil. Chapter 60, verse 2. For behold, I have somewhat to say unto them. This is Moroni, scathing letter to Pahoran, and this is important, and we have to spend some time in this. We'll probably go long on this, but there is so much important stuff in this, okay? Chapter 60, verse 2, for behold, I have somewhat to say unto them by the way of condemnation. For behold, ye yourselves know that ye have been appointed to gather together men and arm them with swords and with scimitars and all manner of weapons of war of every kind, and send forth against the Lamanites in whatsoever parts that they should come into our land. What was Pahoran's duty in the war, Jason?
He had a man train and equip, as we would say. That was his job, to fund and to arm military forces, to give to Moroni as the commander for what we would say is operational command.
Now, the reason that I want to draw such focus and attention to this verse is because this interchange that happens with Pahoran, especially on the response. Now, if we jump back to Alma chapter 50, verse 39, this is where this mandate is recorded because remember, Nephi-Ha had died and they needed a replacement chief judge, and Pahoran was sworn in. But listen to what it said in Alma chapter 50, verse 39. Behold, it came to pass that the son of Nephi-Ha was appointed to fill the judgment seat in the stead of his father. Yea, he was appointed chief judge and governor over the people with an oath and sacred ordinance to judge righteously and to keep the peace and the freedom of the people, and to grant unto them their sacred privileges to worship the Lord their God, yea, to support and maintain the cause of God all his days, and to bring the wicked to justice according to their crime. That was his oath. That was his sacred ordinance. That was his mandate. Now, the kingmen, here's what we need to understand. Later, we're going to look at how he felt uneasy about this. The kingmen were Nephites, but they defected. And for all intents and purposes, he should have recognized at that point they were Lamanites, right? And I think that's how we get into some of this issue. All right, so I think we teed that up here. 10 and 11. Let me make sure I had those right ones. Chapter 60, verse 10 and 11. And now, my beloved brethren, for ye ought to be beloved, yea, and ye ought to have stirred yourselves more diligently for the welfare and the freedom of this people. But behold, ye have neglected them, insomuch that the blood of thousands shall come upon your heads for vengeance. Yea, for known unto God were all their cries and all their sufferings. Behold, could ye suppose that ye could sit upon your thrones, and because of the exceeding goodness of God, this is where I think it relates to us, because of the exceeding goodness of God, ye could do nothing, and he would deliver you? Behold, if ye have supposed this, ye have supposed in vain. All right, Jason, what was the impact of Pahoran and the government's failures?
Well, I mean, practically speaking, the Nephite armies were not getting the food, the communications, as we would call them, the supplies, perhaps the arms that they needed to carry out this war. So Pahoran is responsible for creating weakness and inviting the enemies of the people to come in and you know um, I mean, the Book of Mormon is so clear in verse 11. If you could just sit upon your thrones, and then you're just going to rely on the exceeding goodness of God, and do nothing, and that God would just deliver you. The Book of Mormon is always opposing this line of thought of this kind of passive form of faith. The Book of Mormon is saying, no, you must do everything you possibly can in your human capacity, and only then will God give you that extra grace that you need. But if you just sit back and wait for a miracle, it's not coming. You haven't qualified.
Perfect. Thousands died, and they will be responsible for it. Now, we know what's in the response to Pahoran, and we're going to get to that, right? We understand what he said in response, but it's important that you understand what Pahoran's mandate was and what he was responsible to do. All right, we just learned what the impact of Pahoran and the rest of the government's failure was in fulfilling their duties. Some may even call it, this might be too harsh, but dereliction of duties in the military term, when they had such a stringent demand on how much diligence they were supposed to be providing, and it appears that they did not, even after Pahoran's response. Verse 15 of Alma chapter 60 says this, for were it not for the wickedness which first commenced at our head, we could have withstood our enemies, that they could have gained no power over us. And then verse 17, but behold, now the Lamanites are coming upon us, taking possession of our lands, and they are murdering our people with the sword, yea, our women and our children, and also carrying them away captive, causing them that they should suffer all manner of afflictions. This is typical war stuff that happens to people who are captured, right? What is the only reason that the Lamanites were succeeding in the war, Jason?
Uh, well, it seems to me, I mean, Moroni's point of view is they're not getting enough logistical supply, arming support from their central government, and it's just exposing them to the Lamanites' attacks.
And I hung you out to dry there a little bit, but he also mentions the kingmen in this. in these
Yeah.
chapters, right? And
Oh yeah,
how
the kingmen, the kingmen are
the factions in their government.
challenging. Yeah, they're
Mhm.
challenging the central government. There's kind of like almost a civil war happening at the same time as there's an external war.
Yeah, it's
It's hot.
infighting in their basically in their halls of Congress, right? Of what's
Yeah.
going on, right? Okay. Yeah, the factions in those, and then here's something that's important to note though. Like they said this about Rome, they said about these about great empires, including America. The only thing that can defeat us is ourselves. And what does that mean? So here's the thing. Realize this. Wicked don't play well together. They eat their own, they fall apart, they fight, they have selfish interest, and they start kind of deteriorating and breaking themselves down. And that's really no match for a united, righteous people who are doing the Lord's work, who have the blessings of heaven and the unity that comes for fighting for the best cause, right? And so, if they maintained that unity and that diligence, they wouldn't have had this happen. Remember, Zarahemna tried to attack just earlier in chapter 43, 44. The Nephites were able to dispel with them fairly, I don't want to say easily, but it wasn't that big of an issue. It was Amalickiah and the kingmen that started the infighting internally that weakened the country for hostile takeover, essentially.
Yeah.
We in alignment on that?
Yep.
All right. This is an introspective question. Are we careless? Are you careless in defending our freedoms? Verse 19, 21, 23. Or is it that ye have neglected us because ye are in the heart of our country and ye are surrounded by security, that ye do not cause food to be sent unto us and also men to strengthen our armies? Think about that yourself. Is because you've been surrounded by security for so long that you don't take it seriously? Verse 21, or do you suppose that the Lord will still deliver us while we sit upon our thrones and do not make use of the means which the Lord has provided for us? You belong to one of to the richest people in history that we know of. You have the means to prepare yourselves spiritually and physically. Are you making use of those means, or are you just playing and buying boats? Verse 23, do ye suppose that God will look upon you as guiltless while ye sit still and behold these things? Behold, I say unto you, nay. I think all of us could probably be better and rouse ourselves to more intentional defense of our homes, both from enemies, foreign and domestic. What do you think, Jason? Are we careless in defending our freedoms?
I think many of us are, unfortunately. Um, you know, we're blessed as the United States of America to be uh we've got two oceans on our eastern and western flanks
The
that
biggest
separate
oceans.
the biggest oceans
Yeah.
that separate us from a lot of the turmoil in other parts of the world. But I think we need to be very keen on our own borders. Just my personal opinion, not speaking on behalf of any government or any party, but we need to be aware that there are there are enemies out there that would love to destroy the United States through whether it's directly, and there's so many ways to wage war. I think that what our enemies have learned that it's most effective is to break down our will, to fight and to defend our country, our people, our freedoms, our borders, our sovereignty. And they just keep hitting at us, causing us to doubt ourselves, causing us to doubt the the virtue of our principles. Um, and sometimes it just takes going out into the world and seeing how other countries are doing things to realize that we have something that we have to preserve, we have to give to our children, our grandchildren, our posterity. We have to deliver it to them, and otherwise, what's there going to be left? So many people just try to eat, drink, and be merry in this life, and they don't think of what they need to give to future generations. And that's what I worry about. There's just abstention of responsibility for future generations.
Yeah. And I would say that, oh, how do I want to say this? Well, we may circle around at this being careless in defending our freedoms. This may sound like a cliche, but think about it this way. The educational system, the mainstream media, entertainment that you're seeing on modern streaming services, they're all pretty much, telling you the same story that America is fundamentally flawed, that it was evil from inception, and that other places are better. I would ask, how many of these other countries have people risking their lives to swim to their country, to try to know that they're taking their lives in their own hands to cross a desert to get into this country, knowing they're breaking the law? People are still trying to do anything they can. They would give up their lives to have their children grow up in America, right? This is
Yeah,
people in other countries. So when we're hearing this message
that's true.
internally that America is so wicked, then why are people killing themselves to get here just to have a chance of the American life? You have to
Yeah,
keep that in mind.
yeah, yeah. We got yeah. That's pretty powerful. You're in the heart of our country and you're surrounded by security. You don't cause food to be sent unto the armies, men to strengthen the armies. I mean, go and do some research about U.S. military service and how difficult recruiting is. And I mean, there's certain just only categories of and spots around the country where recruits are coming from. I mean, there's a lot of research about it. We got to strengthen our national will.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
got to think outside the box. Got to think outside. I mean, that's amazing. Verse 19. Like it's speaking to our day.
Yes, absolutely. We're so dang comfortable and threats are so far away from us that we start, harboring asinine ideas about our place in the world and how America is a wicked place. Absolutely moronic ideas that are being parroted in these silos.
Yeah.
All right, verse 24 and 25 and 29, and I'm just reading pieces of this. Except ye do repent of that which ye have done and begin to be up and doing. Verse 25, and come out and show unto me a true spirit of freedom and strive to strengthen and fortify our armies. Verse 29, the time is now at hand that except ye do bestir yourselves in the defense of your country and your little ones, the sword of justice doth hang over you. So these are the things that Moroni is telling Pahoran, hey, get your together, right? Get your act together, and you need to do this. Otherwise, I'm coming for you. Verse
Yeah.
28, yea, behold, I do not fear your power nor your authority. And I think, I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is one of those main statements that Moroni made that gave Mormons such a deep respect for him that he made the comment, if all men had been and ever would be like unto Moroni, the powers of hell would be shaken, and naming his own son Moroni. I think this respect was greatly earned on this statement, verse 28. Yea, behold, I do not fear your power nor your authority, but it is my God whom I fear. And it is according to his commandments that I do take my sword to defend the cause of my country. And it is because of your iniquity that we have suffered so much loss. Verse or chapter 61. Do you want to comment on that? I didn't have a specific question. I'm just showing the interchange.
No, I mean, I've reading these chapters made me look a lot at World War II and, um, you know, waking up the sleeping giant idea that we learn about and the mobilization of so many men and women for uniform service, but also the mobilization of, the vast stores of America's industry
Hmm.
to defeat pure evil in the world. Um, and what happened was that moment actually thrust the United States into global leadership because after that, and the world saw the mighty power of the United States in putting down these evils and reconstructing the world, also being merciful to our enemies. I mean, vanquishing the Germans and the Japanese and the Italians, but then, rebuilding them to become our allies.
That is
And
very uncommon in human history, Jason, to your
it's
point.
it's exceptional, actually, that you rebuild your enemies, so that your former enemies, so they become your allies and become prosperous. And I mean, Germany and Japan are top 5 economies in the world.
Mhm.
That's thanks to the United States uh, generousness, you know. So and mercy, uh, and that's why the world continues to look to the United States. It was all what
But Jason,
and
America is so racist. They're so wicked.
I people are just, I think they just hate what is good.
Yeah.
And people will complain about all the wars, but look, the United States had to assume responsibility for the good of the world. And the United States has been a global force for good. Look at all the other empires, the great powers that have existed in history. It's a strength to the people, and that's ultimately, it's not that you hate America, you also hate the American people. It's a shame that we've twisted ourselves. It's a very satanic thing, actually, um, to hate your country in that way, to hate your fellow citizens. We're continuing to see those splinters, but the Book of Mormon is, if you're reading it carefully and you're embracing it, I can't see how a Latter-day Saint could feel that way if they're really believing in these scriptures.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. They're convinced that they need to believe the voices in the world, not the scriptures, many of them. Chapter 61. All right. Moroni issued this scathing letter to Pahoran, and he responds. He tells of the insurrection of the kingmen and how he was driven out, but he has been gathering together the freemen, people who are setting at defiance the kingmen. Okay, so he makes a compelling argument that, hey, it wasn't my fault that this all happened.
Yeah.
Okay. In verse 9, and now in your epistle you have censured me, but it mattereth not. I am not angry, but to rejoice in the greatness of your height or your heart. I, Pahoran, do not seek for power, save only to retain my judgment seat, that I may preserve the rights and the liberty of my people. My soul standeth fast in that liberty in the which God hath made us free. So Pahoran said all the right things to assuage Moroni's fury to this point, right? But he mentioned one thing that shows Moroni's censure was not unmerited towards him, right? He did talk about these kingmen, which Moroni had correctly supposed that there was this faction and they were causing problems. But he kind of lumped Pahoran into that, which was incorrect. But in verse 19, and now, Moroni, I do joy in receiving your epistle, for I was somewhat worried concerning what we should do, whether it should be just in us to go against our brethren. That verse to me is what jumps out. So was Moroni's scathing letter to Pahoran unmerited? Not entirely. So this hesitation from Pahoran, this indecision, this lack of proactivity of actively ferreting out these kingmen, of finding them and getting rid of them, and even enforcing it by death if necessary, is what led to the destruction, torture, and rape of thousands of innocent Nephites, and also the destruction of many Lamanites. Moroni may have missed the mark on the motive of Pahoran, but I don't think he missed far on the net effect of Pahoran's lack of decision and determination as far as that. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I think there is a sense of caving there in Pahoran. Um, you know, that Pahoran wasn't really willing to go that far to preserve the country.
And
T
one
Yeah.
thing to add context to this, right after Pahoran had been, what do we want to call it, anointed the chief judge. Right after that, remember earlier in the last half of the war chapters we talked about, they had to deal with kingmen as well, and this is where Moroni got permission. Right, he got the the approval from Pahoran to round up these kingmen and put them to death or cause them to hoist the title of liberty. Right, So they had already been through this. Pahoran already saw how diligent Moroni was in rounding up these kingmen and dealing with them. He already saw that happen. But yet, these years later, when it turned up again, Pahoran didn't take the action that he knew he needed to, that they had already done. Thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a fair interpretation. I mean, obviously, I mean, Mormon is writing the record, and Mormon sees Moroni as having made the right decisions. But you also see the trust that Pahoran has in his commander, right? And he's taking advice. We call it, the best military advice. That's
Mhm.
the commander's job. Moroni has no desire to take over the whole government. He's just trying to win the war. He's trying to get the supplies that his troops need so they can win for the sake of the country. I mean, that's what's so powerfully patriotic about Moroni is he has no ambitions, no personal ambitions, nothing. He's he's not like, I'm going to create a military dictatorship, Pahoran. No, he's like, okay, he's just trying to get Pahoran as the lawful judge of the country. So there's a separation of powers there,
Yeah.
and Moroni's the commander, and
Yeah.
that's he's just doing it for his country.
He's not trying to retire and live fat off lobbyists for the military industrial complex, right? That's not what he's trying to do.
No, I don't think so. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but he's and he's not trying, I would say he's not trying to establish some kind of military dictatorship, even though he could. He's got the people, he could walk in and he could take out Horan and then he could run everything. But
Which was a constant fear of the ancient Romans, by the way.
yeah, the military commanders will, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why they're writing letters, and Moroni's not actually going to
Yeah.
execute Pahoran. We've seen that in history. So you could see the power that Moroni has, but then also how he tempers it, both toward his own government, toward the enemy. You see this very, very well balanced, ethical, righteous warrior that
All men
it's
had
really,
been and were and ever would be. Like an
really incredible that, the delineation. It's the kind, I mean, if it wasn't a religious text, it's great stuff to study in war colleges. And like these chapters really demonstrate what the ideal commander should be
excellent.
and the commander's role.
Well,
Yep.
couple final thoughts, Jason. You can obviously chime in. Brothers and sisters, wherever we're at, we may be experiencing times of peace and abundance. This can only be maintained through diligent repentance, preparation, and threat deterrence. That's another thing that both Jason and I agreed on is over and over. Moroni shows his diligence by constantly evolving and improving their defenses, their weapons of war. It was a constant thing, the threat deterrence, being ahead of the threats. And we
Yeah.
saw that the Lamanites were caught off guard a couple times by the exceeding wisdom of the Nephites in their armor that they wore first. And then the Lamanites went back and they said, oh, well, let's armor up too. Then they came back and then they found these fortifications like they never saw before. Moroni kept pushing the envelope as far as the sophistication of their defenses and this overwhelming force. And that brought safety and security to the people, and they loved him for it. Agree?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
That's it's a case for, advancing both technology and capabilities and also stealing up the will to fight and defend.
absolutely. And it was not, let's reiterate this and compare it to our day. Listen, if you look at the rise to power of Amalickiah, okay, he uses his conspiracy to insert himself into the foreign military and then to rise up the ranks and poison and murder somebody to take that rank. This is all conspiracy stuff, right? Not only that, when he goes back to the Lamanites, you remember when the king of the Lamanites came out to greet him, they perpetuated what is called a false flag event. It was Amalickiah's people who killed the king of the Lamanites, immediately said it was his guards and chased them off. So they
Yeah.
used this deception to take power. Are we seeing these kind of things today? And then he used this ill-gotten power to then turn those forces back on his own people to subjugate them and to gain their riches to rule over them. These are things we're seeing today. Okay, and let's
Yep.
finish with this. It was not the Lamanites that almost overthrew the Nephites. It was the wicked Nephites that did. The Book of Mormon is a voice of warning for our day. You must mentally prepare for the fact that it might be your neighbors, the people you grew up with, or even your family members that may defect from the truth and the cause of freedom and turn out to be your biggest threat. Take physical, spiritual, and mental preparation seriously for the coming days of tribulation. That's my final thought. Jason, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think for those of us that were raised in the right way, and everybody's at different degrees of commitment. Um, I just think that there's other international actors that really want to see the demise of the United States, and so I just think it's important to have unity as the American people. And what binds us is not uh, a particular religion or particular racial or ethnic identity. What binds us is our covenant with the Constitution of the United States, the inspired system that our founders gave us. And so, I mean, military officers and other officers of government take oaths and make covenants to uphold the Constitution of the United States. But I mean, ordinary citizens should also take this seriously, because we all have a role to play in delivering freedom and our constitutional republic to future generations. I mean, so we have to be vigilant, and a lot of it is mostly just in the realm of ideas, is what I
Mhm.
see. I mean, there's
What we
certain
teach, what we talk about. Yeah.
yeah, there are certain cities that have a lot of crime or drugs or terrorism, or but I think overall it's the commitment of our minds and our will to defend the constitutional freedoms and values that we've been given by so many. I mean, just go to the war memorials and see how many people sacrificed before you so that
Mhm.
you can have this system from generation to generation.
Yeah.
It's not the natural state, right? The natural man is an enemy to God, but also just the natural states of government can be an enemy to God as well. We have this inspired system that we have to be vigilant and
Yeah.
refresh it to keep it going, so that our posterity can still have the blessings of it. That's what motivates me, because it's like I grew up pretty in a nice free country. I'm grateful for how I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I was able to be raised in a free country, and I felt a duty to go out and defend it, so I could give it to future generations. But if we lose that kind of patriotism and commitment, then it's bad for us, but it's also bad for the whole world, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So that's the way I look at things. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, our efforts to protect and preserve our freedoms and our country do not begin and end November every 2 years, right? We need to be doing it every day. It's not just
Yeah,
elections, right? When we elect somebody, that doesn't absolve us from all future efforts of,
I
okay,
like
now
that.
it's in
Yeah.
his hands. We each have to do our part in our communications, in
Yes.
voicing our concerns. I think so many, and that's one of the ways I think that we've been defeated from the outside is it's become a faux pas to express national pride and this desire to uphold the American standard. That's now become an instance of racism and things like that. We've got to fight through that and proclaim the good that America has done in the past, right? And the inspiration that it's been. And one thing I do
Yeah.
want to finish on, this has been a lot of doom and gloom, but I do want you guys to absorb this thought. Doctrine and Covenants 3830, it talks about, these voices of the world being louder basically than we can handle. But if ye are prepared, ye shall not fear. If we read the Book of Mormon, if we have faith in Jesus Christ, if we repent, we will have peace no matter what is going on around us. Even these war fighters that died happy in the cause. and we can live without fear while we are preparing to protect the ones we love, the freedoms that we love, and further the cause of God.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good. Responsible citizenship
Responsible citizenship.
for
Okay, guys,
every
we knew
citizen.
that this would be a heater. We hope that you enjoyed it. So, with that, we very much encourage you to continually immerse yourself in the scriptures and deepen your conversion to the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. We love you guys, and we'll see you next time.